now doing it are going offshore. They have to be prepared to go to Thailand or America, spend a whole lot of money, and again, there's no guarantee it's going to work. So these people are pretty desperate. Now, we've always said, or people who've been controlling reproductive technology said, it should be the best interest of the child. Now, can I put it to you that maybe it's in the best interest of the child to be a boy if that couple really wants a boy, or to be a girl if that couple really wants a girl? Because if they have a child naturally, and it's the opposite sex, the child may not have as good a loving, accepting family, unconditional love.
Yeah, I'm interested in that argument that you make, because it's one that I've heard before. Is there evidence to show that that's the way that parents actually behave once the child's actually born? I mean, you may have hope for a child of a particular sex, but when they're there, do you really see a difference in the attitude of parents?
I don't know. I don't think there would be any evidence, Waleed, but you know, I don't think anyone's looked at those sort of studies. It'd be interesting. I don't know.
I'd like to respond to it.
Sure.
That question that you raise of the couple treating the child badly, I guess, I mean, I don't know that there's any evidence for it, but if that was the case, that would only highlight the point that I'm making, that parenthood ought not be like that. Parenthood ought not be conditional.
I agree with you. We shouldn't let anyone be parents.
I mean, but no. If you think about the issue of gender, if a couple are choosing a child because they want a child of a particular gender, what are they saying about gender that makes it so important? What's the stereotype of gender that's being used there that says that this is so vitally important to have a child of this gender rather than the other gender, that they're actually are going to go through this kind of process in order to achieve it? I mean, that initially, the very fact that they want to go through all of that process to achieve it says something to me that indicates that their attitude to parenthood isn't completely accepting.
I mean, there's a woman who says, I've had 3 boys. I really love my boys and I wouldn't be without them, but I really dearly love to have a girl who I can dress in pretty dresses and put pink ribbons on her hair.
And the girl may not want to do all those sorts of things. That's what I'm saying. If there's a stereotype that you've got of what a girl should be, then I pity that girl having to conform to those ideas of what a girl should be.
I guess...
Can I just say something? Sure. There's a parallel debate where we do have some experience, and this is creating so-called saviour siblings, using these technologies to create a child who can give some blood upon being born to save the life of an existing sibling who has no stem cell donor. Now, Nick and other people objected to this with exactly the same claim, that parents won't unconditionally love these children, that this is the wrong kind of attitude. You should only have children, you know, on the basis of unconditional love for that child's sake. There's absolutely no evidence to support Nick's claims that these people treat these children adversely when they've been born as saviour siblings.
I'm sorry, there are just so few of them. We've got no evidence.
There is no evidence to support any of your claims about the way people treat children. So you're trying to deny them access to make choices, to infringe their freedom to go and visit Gab and get treatment that they want or interventions they want on the basis of just pure speculation about the quality of their parenting and the way they'll treat their children. And I think that is fundamentally against the principles of a liberal society of intervening in freedom without any evidence of harming anyone.
Well, the issue here is the interests of children and the kinds of...
There's no evidence that children in these circumstances are harmed in any way.
Yeah, but the burden of proof when it comes to new technologies is in the other direction.
No, sorry.
The burden of proof of a technology like this is to prove its safety.
No, the burden of proof should not be to...
That's the way we operate on all of the new technologies, except this one. If you want to introduce a new drug into the community, if you want to introduce a new kind of farming, if you want to do a different kind of mining, you've got to show that the harm isn't there. You've got to do the assessments.
I'm sorry, the technology is physically safe enough. We know that. What you're speculating is that there will be people who are unfit parents.
We don't. If you look at the most recent results for Victoria. For PGD, that is the results published for the year 2009-2010, there was a recorded 80% miscarriage rate following PGD compared to 22% in ordinary IVF.
Well, this is just a tiny sample. Gab Kovacs,
it's a small sample. It's 164 patients.
How safe is PGD and IVF? You're the expert.
Well, it depends on what you mean by safe. I mean, I think IVF, 5 million babies now born worldwide. I don't think there's any major abnormalities that would happen that we haven't unearthed. Louis Brown, the world's first.
We're talking about PGD, though.
We're talking about PGD.
Yeah.
Well, PGD, again, there is a very good surveillance going on for the European Society of Human Reproduction. They record all the cases. And, I mean, unfortunately, I'm too old and senile now to remember figures off the top of my head. But certainly they produce the data each year, and it is published as not a significant increase in the abnormality as such.
Can I...
Sorry.
No, go.
And I can't tell you the miscarriage rate off the top of my head. I just haven't got that. But it's, you know, it's still relatively new. There are still not that many people. It's a complex technology. But it's certainly for gender selection, it's readily available. And if it wasn't for the fact that it was illegal, probably some people would choose it. Not many people, but there would be some people who would choose it.
Can I bring the discussion back to the ethical questions? A lot of what's been said here has been about parents' right to choose, for instance. Nicholas, if I may paraphrase you, essentially arguing that this is not the way that we should be thinking of children, of parenthood. Julian, I want to ask you then, the ethical argument that you make, what's the philosophical basis for it? Is it about the rights of the parents as individuals, or are you making a social good argument? Because we haven't really touched on the social good aspects of the discussion so far.
Well, there are two distinct arguments. One is about whether people should be free to access these technologies, and that is just a basic principle of freedom within a liberal society, that you should be free unless you're harming other people. And the mere speculation that you might harm someone is not a reason to infringe people's freedom. So it's a fundamental principle of a liberal society. Nick might have his own views, or other people might have their views on how people should found their families, how many children they should have, whether they should use contraception or not, but those views should not be imposed to restrict freedom. So that's one basic political, philosophical tenet. The second tenet about selecting children is simply a rational principle. If you've got two embryos and you've got information about those, you should use that information to select the best one. That's how you make rational choices. So when you're having children, you're making a choice about, when you have a range of embryos, which of them to bring into existence. So
I understand that, but I guess what I'm asking is, what are the parameters? What's the basis of that choice? When I say this is the better embryo, am I thinking, or would you require us to think socially, or are you thinking individually for that person? So let me give the example of, let's assume we can detect this embryo will be more intelligent than this one. Do I choose the more intelligent embryo because I decide it's better and it's better for that child? Or do I say, well, society needs stupid people in order to function, and therefore I will do my bit for society in making that? Well, what are our horizons? Are they social or are they individual?
Basically, a principle of reproductive decision-making is that there is an obligation to focus on the child's welfare, as Gab Kovacs said. Now, the parameters of that should be if those choices significantly harm other people in society. So if you're making choices that impose direct costs on other people, that would be a reason for intervening. The opposite of that, if making certain choices benefits society, well, that's a reason. If having children that are going to be more productive benefits the economy, well, that's a reason. But should it be imposed on people? No. We should keep the focus of reproductive ethics on the child. So I think the only real way of intervening in parents should be when they're harming somebody, and unfortunately that's not the focus of this debate. It's about certain views about the way parenting should be, or about how society should be constructed, and I think that's very dangerous.
Wouldn't it be consistent with your view to say that when a couple is faced with this choice of embryos, some that are more able than others in different ways, wouldn't you say then, on your view, that it would be harming those children to choose the ones that had the lesser ability?
Well, you're not harming them because that's their only choice of coming into existence. But you're making a choice between different individuals here. I mean, it's important also when people say, well, disability is bad. We all have disabilities now. We'll all find that we have impediments to our lives going as well as they could go. So this idea that disabilities are just things like deafness and blindness is a very mistaken and outdated concept of disability. We all have things, our personality traits, different personality traits make it much more difficult for us in life. We're all disabled to some
extent. Well, we already do this, or a large proportion of the community do this, by the first trimester screening. Now, there are some people who would not want to go ahead and do anything about it, and they don't have it, and no one forced them to have it. But the majority of people who are pregnant want to have first trimester screening to look for chromosomal abnormalities and neural tube defects and things, and they have the choice, and then they have the choice of choosing that pregnancy or not choosing that pregnancy once they made a diagnosis. For the people who are not interested, we don't force them to have this test done, and don't force them then to terminate the pregnancy. So kind of that's what's happening in a practical way today, and what Julian is talking about.
If I can follow
future.
it up, there's a culture there, I think, that's worth talking about. I've been doing a fair bit of work lately in this area to see what is happening with couples who have the first trimester screening. We know that about 90% of those couples in this society, if they have a serious abnormality, will abort the child. But we also know, and from figures from the UK and the US, where there's a slightly different set of circumstances, where they are offered what's called perinatal palliative care or perinatal hospice care. And we know that 90% reduces down to 60%. That is, 40% choose the perinatal hospice care. In other words, they choose to continue their pregnancy through to the child being born with a serious abnormality. And it says something, I think, the difference in the figures of 90% to 60% says something about our own Australian culture and what we don't provide. And what we're seeing is accounts of women who are saying, who made the choice after the screening not to have an abortion when they had a child with a serious abnormality. And they talk about the enormous pressures that are applied to them and how difficult it is for them to continue on with those pregnancies in this society, because the medical approach to them is to sort of say, well, you brought this on yourself. This is your problem. You must have known you were going to have to deal with this. And there aren't, in this community, we don't have the supports. We don't have the perinatal hospice services or perinatal care services for people in these circumstances. Now, the point I'm making is that if we move a little bit further down the track, so that we have developed PGD in the way that Julian says we will and Gab says we won't, but if we have developed it down the track like that, will those people also be under those same pressures that women are under right now not to continue their pregnancies?
I'm going to do something very risky, perhaps foolish, given we've only got 10 minutes left. I want to raise the question of the destruction of embryos in the process of scientific research. And Nicholas, I want to come to you on this because I understand your position's against it, but on the basis that if you believe that this is a human life, then there's no difference essentially between destroying that life for scientific research purposes or destroying the life of anyone here for the same purposes. Is that a misrepresentation of your argument?
Yeah, there are obvious differences between destroying an embryo that nobody's yet got to know and destroying people that we've formed friendships with and all the rest of it. So there are a whole lot of psychological differences, obviously. But when you're talking about the nature of this being, and it was interesting that Julian a minute ago was saying that these embryos already exist, so in terms of discriminating against them by destroying the ones with disabilities. But that's the view I would take. I was surprised he took it. So my view is that once an embryo comes into being, there's a new, unique human being there. I'm not saying it's a human being that has feelings or a human being that has yet a functioning brain, but it is a member of the human race. It is a member of our species. It is a member of the human family. And so to destroy it is to destroy a member of the human family.
What if the destruction of it, though, saves another member of the human family? Given that you've accepted now there is a difference between that life and the lives of people...
I'm not saying there's any difference in terms of intrinsic value. I'm saying there are differences, obviously, in terms of the humanity that's involved.
So you're saying there's no basis on which to privilege one kind of life?
Look, if you say, why don't we use embryos to produce cures and treatments and so on, why don't we use people who have dementia, or why don't we use people who are no longer conscious and so on? And the reason is because they're members of the human family. We don't treat the unresponsive people in that sort of a way.
Could it be that it's also because they have a social meaning attached to them that is different to that which isn't attached to an embryo, as you've said?
There's a difference in that they've got past relationships, and then there are people around them who still care for them. And so yes, there are differences in a social sense, but it doesn't change the nature of who they are as persons. They are still living members of the human family, just as the embryo is a living member of the human family.
Julian, does it matter whether or not we categorise them as human beings at that point?
Well, they're clearly human beings in the sense